Hello, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable discussion. Before we get started, let me remind you that we are covered by the BIPCOT No Government License, which allows for the reuse and distribution of this podcast by anyone and everyone except for governments and the bludgies thereof. You can learn more about that at bipcot.org. That is BIPCOT.org. This is episode 78, which
nice.
We haven't named yet, but it's going to be something about Boogaloo and Virginia.
Yeah, Boogadishu.
Boogadishu. That's one of my new favorite terms, by the way. No, what's the
everyone?
The one?
Everyone just calls it Boog here. No one calls it Boogadishu.
Yeah, it's Boog
or the Boog.
Or the Boog. The Boojahideen.
The Boojahideen, yes. I've used that term for a while. I like that term, but Boogadishu. That's it.
Yeah.
And then there's the big igloo and the big luau, and they're not as cool. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What is it? Something about the great something hootenanny?
Yeah, I called it the hootenanny.
The hootenanny?
Yeah.
The most glorious of brouhahas.
Yeah.
Shark bait, woo-ha-ha.
I say, lad, I was over there and I couldn't help but notice the brouhaha.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to make a tactical monocle. You can't have the brouhaha without a tactical monocle.
Look, you guys don't live in Virginia, and I do. And I'm just saying, don't make the mistake of thinking that the people here are like super refined or anything like that, okay?
Slinky is from Virginia.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So,
yeah, bear that in mind, okay?
I mean, Robert E. Lee was from Virginia. He was pretty refined gentleman.
We're talking about the people who live here now.
No longer is it an I say, sir. Now it's, hey, y'all want to come back to my place and have some moonshine?
Exactly.
What are shoes?
Yeah. There's a good portion of that in this state. And then there's the other end, like the uber intellectual convinced that they're smarter than everybody else, hoity-toity fucking upwardly mobile assholes that live in the cities, and they're the ones that did this to us.
Well, yeah. I mean, in general, I think most states, that's the way it is you have the hyper left cities, and then you have the majority of the landmass, which is people who understand like how to be self-sufficient and just want to get left alone and everything else. And it's this constant.
And know how to do useful shit. Know how to fucking survive without the city's precious fucking society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love when I get that from states.
That's the part of Virginia I live in.
Ooh, there you go. Colonel Sam Houston was from Virginia.
Yep. Didn't wind up, being associated with Virginia by the end of his life, but he's kind of associated other directions.
Yeah.
But
ooh, Meriwether Lewis and Clark.
Yep.
He's from Virginia.
Actually, most of the major Civil War commanders were from Virginia, at least the ones that everybody talks about, because it was mostly Virginians who wrote the histories after the war, and they have this tendency to talk about themselves more than anybody else. So.
How about James Monroe and Patrick Henry?
James Monroe
Thomas
was
Jefferson
born
too,
right
right?
here. James Monroe is from the county that I live in, King George. It's all over the courthouse.
Oh boy.
So, there's like plaques everywhere. And George Washington, I live like right between where he was born and where he grew up at Ferry Farm. Ferry Farm's like 30 minutes from my house.
Wasn't that his brother's farm? I feel like because that's where he made a lot of his money, wasn't it himself? It was from his brother and because he married a rich widow.
Yeah, right. Like his mother, Mary Washington, lived right across the Rappahannock River from Ferry Farm. Seriously, I mean, you can get, if you didn't have to like drive way down to get the bridge across the river and stuff, like as the crow flies, it's probably maybe half a mile from Ferry Farm to where Mary Washington had her house, which was a decently nice house. It's still standing in downtown Fredericksburg. So you can go and tour it and shit like that. But yeah, it would make sense that Ferry Farm was a family farm, because that's where George Washington grew up. So,
where he chopped down the cherry tree allegedly, except didn't, because that's a load of shit.
Right.
It never actually happened.
He chewed it. He chewed it down with his wooden teeth. Come on now.
That's right.
Like a fucking beaver.
Speaking of beavers,
It was the revolutionary beaver.
speaking of beavers, and this isn't even going to be dirty. I mean, that would have been a good.
Too late. My mind already went there.
Yeah.
We're kind of.
No, I'm doing an amigurumi Oregon State University beaver, like, because that's their animal. So my dad wants to sell the ducks and the beeves, like little amigurumi critters, out of his office. So I'm making some of those right now. That's fun.
Ducks and the beavers.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a big game in Oregon. It's literally called the Civil War.
Yeah, Civil War is huge.
Yeah.
They're only what, 40 miles apart? Something like that.
A little more from Corvallis
to
to
Bend?
Eugene. No, Eugene.
You sure?
U of O is in Eugene.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really particularly liked the Ducks. But...
Yeah. Most people who aren't Ducks fans don't like the Ducks.
Like I'm a Wisconsin Badgers fan, obviously, and I just don't like the Ducks. It's not like Wisconsin doesn't have its own rivalry, because it's got the battle for Paul Bunyan's axe, which is between University of Wisconsin and University of Minnesota. They do their big rivalry thing, and I would say that I actually dislike the Ducks more than I dislike the Golden Gophers. So,
well, the U of O has so much fucking money running through it. So much alumni money.
Phil Nike
runs through U of O.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phil Nike.
Yeah. So their football team attracts these huge players.
47.4 miles.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're right now. I mean, like it's practically like a high school football rivalry kind of thing because of the proximity, but like major universities.
Yeah. But U of O, like, they're fucking arrogant, man. They are so fucking arrogant. That's why nobody else likes them. So I'm not above exploiting that fucking market, though.
As a Cal fan, I do not like Oregon very much.
Yeah.
No. I don't like USC even more, though.
And Oregon State is my dad's alma mater, the Beavs. And they just suck, unfortunately. Their football team always sucks.
They have a good basketball team, though.
Right.
You know what's funny is my high school mascot, the high school that I graduated from, was also the Beavers.
Yeah.
Mine is the Panthers, and they used to have this big stone panther on their sign. And one year, the players from Pittsburgh, which is the city next to us, the Pirates, they came out and put a bunch of M80s in the Panther's mouth and blew its head off. And now they just have like this 1-inch thick steel outline.
Jeez. We were the Grizzlies. So you walk in our school, and it used to have, I don't know if it still does, but this ginormous taxidermy grizzly, like, rah, right in the, you walk in, and it's like looming like 12 feet over your head. Rah.
And now, because of political correctness, it just all reeks of wintergreen.
Yeah.
That was a dip joke.
Yeah.
The Bourgeois Dean needs an animal mascot. We can put it on our flag.
I think it should be the honey badger. I really think that it should just.
I think it should be the Declavore. Yeah, I don't know. Don't pick.
That could be our berserker unit.
You're right.
Declavores.
Yeah. Don't pick a mascot until we see what these people do. So many of them are just bootlickers down to their fucking bones.
Oh.
But, yeah.
Well, yeah,
So-
that was last week. Jason and I were having that conversation about militia movements and just being complete sycophants and kowtowers and to the police. And it's like you do understand who's coming to take it, right? You are aware, like who that's
Yeah.
gonna be. It's especially with Virginia.
Depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
Because Virginia Democrats float prosecution and the National Guard deployment if police don't enforce gun control.
Yeah.
Right now,
And then the National Guard commander came out and made a statement that said literally fucking nothing.
absolutely, his statement said absolutely fuck all, absolutely
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
Not a goddamn thing did he actually say in
No.
that whole statement.
From what I read from it, it sounded like what he was saying was, well, I'm not saying that we'll break our oath, but if we're told to do something, we need to do it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Is basically what it said, which means to me, he did make a statement that said something, which was, oh yeah, we're going to come for your guns, but we just don't want to say it openly because then you guys will be preparing for us.
So
Yeah.
we're getting out of order on that one. Let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
We talked about the paramilitary bill, right? The outlawing paramilitary activities.
Right.
I told my brother about that, and he laughed. Like he literally sat down on the edge of the couch and laughed.
And
So-
you know what's funny about it is like probably 30% of the population of Virginia is veterans and veterans' families.
Like
Well, yeah.
like how many military bases are in
Oh my
Virginia?
God. I don't
There's
even
Norfolk,
fucking know.
there's
I could throw a stone and hit 5 of them from where I'm fucking sitting. You know what I mean?
and the largest military graveyard and most important military graveyard in the U.S. is
Arlington.
Yeah, Arlington, on the former grounds of Arlington House, which was a rebel general's home
Yeah.
previously. But that's the most important, like in terms of American military, that's like the most important sacrosanct location in the entire country.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, Virginia has the headquarters of the Marine Corps in it. And, you know, like most of the people who work in DC live in Virginia.
and not to mention
So-
places like Quantico.
The
Mhm.
headquarters of the
Just
Marine
saying,
Corps.
just
That's
saying.
what Quantico.
Langley.
Langley, yeah, all that other stuff. So okay, going back to the beginning, they passed the bill, or not? They didn't pass the bill. I'm sorry. Okay, they submitted the bill in anticipation of the Democratic governor coming in. So they'll have a Democratic governor, Democratic controlled House, and Democratic controlled Senate.
Super majority.
Right. So they are absolutely foaming at the mouth with anticipation of and in response to that, a lot of cities and counties in Virginia have passed Second Amendment sanctuaries, resolutions, and according to the Attorney General, Mark Herring said that resolutions passed by more than 40 Virginia cities and counties declaring themselves as Second Amendment sanctuaries don't hold any legal weight.
Yeah, we're saying we don't give a fuck what you put in the law.
Hold on.
It has no legal weight.
It gets okay. So Herring told 8 News that the resolutions are simply, quote, expressions of opposition to stricter gun control laws being proposed in the upcoming Virginia General Assembly session. The Attorney General said if any bills are passed, he expects them to be followed by all Virginians.
Ha! Fuck you.
Hold on. Quote, these resolutions have no legal effect whatsoever. It's really the gun lobby that's trying to scare up people.
No, it's not.
When the General Assembly passes in the upcoming session, these laws are going to be enforced and they will be followed.
They'll be enforced by
bludgies.
The bludgies who are all actually signing on to the Second Amendment sanction. There's how many sheriffs now that have said, no, we're not enforcing that. Oh, this will be enforced. Well, by
the National Guard, Andrew.
Yeah, apparently by the National Guard, who said they will.
Yeah, continuing the statement, he says, "quote." So the question has loomed whether these quote sanctuaries will actually choose not to enforce new state gun laws. Quote, I don't think that's going to happen, Herring told 8 News. Quote, these laws, when they're passed, they're going to be followed. And when you look at the resolutions that are being passed, they're really just an expression of opposition to the gun safety measure that Virginians have demanded for a long time.
No.
What Virginians have demanded that? I've literally never
I'll tell you
heard
exactly
anything.
which Virginians. People who live in Alexandria, people who live in Richmond, and people who live in Virginia Beach. They run the entire fucking state.
Yeah. Quote, when you talk to those who are in law enforcement and really push them a little bit, the sheriff or a prosecutor, and say, so really? You mean you're going to allow violent felons to go ahead and purchase firearms?
Well,
no, they back down pretty quickly.
That isn't what this law is about at all. I mean, you want to talk about a bait and switch here. That's we're gonna talk about violent felons. Although a violent felon owning a gun is already illegal on a federal level, so we're gonna ignore that, but we're going to obfuscate what we're actually doing by using that. So you don't understand that what we're saying is no one gets to own an AR. No one gets to own an AK. No one gets to have those things.
To me, that question about violent felons, that's politicians talking out both sides of their mouth. And that's what Kevin calls it. What they mean when they say violent felon is all the people they think are violent that they are going to make felons with their laws. That's what they're talking about when they say violent felons. They're talking about all of us. Every one of us who doesn't want to comply with these fucking new laws. They are going to make us felons, and they think we're violent.
Well, and you'll hear that too sometimes when you listen to what they're talking about when they talk about all these people who say that they're going to violently resist gun control. Well, that's a gun crime, and that makes them criminals. So then they wouldn't be allowed to legally own the weapons anymore.
Yep, exactly.
But let's make this clear: resistance to violence, which is what the state is going to use to try to enforce this. So they fucking start it. Okay. They're the ones who start it. They are the ones who are violent. Resistance to violence is not violence. It is defense. Violence is a violation. Okay? Defending yourself is not a violation.
Do not yeet unless yeeted upon. But if they pose
unless yoded upon.
Unless yoded upon. But if they intend to have a boogaloo, let it start here.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly.
I think that's Boogaloo-tarians 556 or something like that.
Yeah, Boogtarians.
Yeah. So, and then let's see.
Boogalations. It's Boogalations.
Boogalations.
Yes.
There you go.
That's the second book of Boogalations.
Yeah.
556.
Yeah.
Let's see. And this is from December 11th. It says Democratic lawmakers on Capitol Hill say local police who do not enforce gun control measures likely to pass in Virginia should face prosecution and even threats of the National Guard.
Yeah.
You know, and I have to point out what an ostensibly hollow threat that is, because if all of the law enforcement in a given county flat out refuses to enforce your law, you want those same people to then prosecute themselves for saying no? Like, I don't think you understand how checks and balances are, again, ostensibly supposed to work.
Right.
Yeah. So,
and you know what? The National Guard right now might be like, well, we have to follow orders, blah, 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 because they're counting on people being cowed and giving up when they show up. But now, I'm not saying I think this is even likely. Maybe it's not likely. I don't know. If the county, like all the county law enforcement officers, from the sheriff all the way through all the deputies and everybody, if they refuse and the National Guard gets sent in to invade counties in their own fucking state against their own fucking people, at some point, at least half of the National Guard is going to be like, fuck this shit. I took an oath to protect these people. This is bullshit. I'm not doing this anymore.
Worse than that, like not even the oath. Like, we go like that. That's a 50-50, right? I mean, these people are
right.
But
yeah, that's why I said half.
but I mean, being called out to enforce law in your own county against your own neighbors, against your own family in many cases.
Yep. Laws that you know are unconstitutional. Everybody knows these fucking laws are unconstitutional.
You know,
imagine grandma out there with her double barrel, and you're gonna shoot grandma?
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and you know, I can't help but think as they're talking about this with Virginia that this sounds awful familiar. Like we might have had something at some point in the nation's past here where we had National Guard getting called up to invade Virginia, and I seem to remember that not going quite the way they thought it was going to initially.
They weren't wearing camo; they were wearing like blue and the other people, like some people wore gray.
Yeah, it sounds really butternut actually, but it sounds awful familiar.
Yeah.
That's gosh,
Hold on, it gets better. It gets better. Over 75 counties in Virginia have so far adopted such Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions in the Commonwealth. Virginia Democratic officials, however, already say local law enforcement supporting their resolutions will face consequences. Already say local law enforcement supporting these resolutions will face consequences if they do not carry out any new law the state legislature passed. Quote, I hope they resign in good conscience because they cannot uphold the law which they are sworn to uphold, and they're prosecuted for failure to fulfill their oath. That is
their oath to the Constitution.
That oath that says, "I do solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States." That oath.
Hold on. That is from Democratic Representative Gary Conley. He also said, "The law is the law. If that becomes the law, you don't have a choice. Not if you're a sworn officer of the law."
Derpa checks and balances. We won't become tyrannical. Yeah, except see, this is exactly what everyone knew was going to happen. When push comes to shove, they're going to do everything they can to prevent checks and balances from being a thing, as they always have.
Yep.
So obviously,
and then Democratic.
You're an English lord. You have to rape that Scottish bride on her wedding night. That's the law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it's exactly the same thing that we saw in a lot of border states at the inception of the Civil War, when you had the suspension of habeas corpus, especially in Maryland, the suspension of habeas corpus by Abraham Lincoln, where you allowed these military tribunals to happen and indefinitely detain people. And
Baltimore, didn't Abraham Lincoln order the death of like 11 people?
He ordered executions. He had somebody, I think it was actually Seward, had threatened a bunch of executions, and Lincoln was like, no, because the Confederates said they were going to then execute a bunch of, loyalist prisoners, and that was not going to go well. But no, they suspended habeas corpus, and when habeas corpus was suspended, and there were members of the Union military who were more than happy to go ahead and enforce that, and judges were like, no, you're not allowed to do that. They just ignored it. And they said, no, I'm still not going to bring this person before your court, and there's nothing you can do to stop me from just ignoring you, because in case you forgot, I have a bunch of guns.
Yeah.
So it keeps going. Democratic Virginia Representative Donald McEachin suggests cutting off state funds to certain counties that do not comply with any new gun control measures that are passed in Richmond.
Hey, we are shaking in our boots. All these counties that have 2A sanctuary resolutions, these are the counties we are talking about. People know how to fucking survive in these counties. We don't need your stupid state money. Fuck you.
Yeah, we'll take all your money away. That's fine. I can just go on living exactly the way I've been.
Quote,
Oh
no, the grass won't get cut. Okay.
Yeah. And
yeah, right. Everybody out here has a riding lawnmower, I promise.
Yeah.
The parks will get
quote,
cut.
Quote, they certainly risk funding because if the sheriff's department is not going to enforce the law, they're going to lose money. The county's attorney's office are not going to have the money to prosecute because their prosecutions are going to go down.
Oh no.
Oh no, less people being arrested.
Oh
Damn.
no. This just sounds awful.
Yeah.
Don't threaten me with a good time. Like I'm picturing that scene from Monsters Inc. with where he's threatening Wazowski and he calls him a cretin and he's like, "Hey, if you're gonna threaten me, do it correctly."
Yeah, it's cretin.
All right. This is the ice scene right here. McEachin also noted that Democratic Virginia Governor Ralph Northam could also call out the National Guard if necessary. Quote, and ultimately, I'm not the governor, but the governor may have to nationalize the National Guard to enforce the law. That's his call because I don't know how serious these counties are and how severe the violations of law will be, but that's obviously an option he has.
You know what my response to that is? This is Virginia. The Revolutionary War was fought here. The Civil War was fought here. We got more battlegrounds than any other state in this fucking nation. And we've been keeping them mowed and ready for you. Let's fucking do it.
Can you imagine another federal defeat at Bull Run? Like, like number 3. You guys just aren't picking up on this.
Yeah,
this is not going in your favor.
Yeah.
Well, the law is the law.
Yeah, I love that. The law is the law. And and remember,
calm down.
The Second Amendment is the fucking law. Stop violating it by writing these other laws.
Yeah, first of all,
calm down, Representative Dredd.
Yeah, exactly. The Constitution is the be-all, end-all law in the United States.
Supreme law of the land.
Supposed to be. And
any law that violates that is null and void automatically. However, despite the fact that that's not actually how it works, well, in a practical sense, what you're talking about is you're talking about a person who's saying, well, no, it's the law, so it's going to get enforced. And he's declaring this as all of the people who are the only people who are going to enforce it are saying, I'm not going to enforce this.
Right.
And the prosecutors are saying, I won't prosecute any of these cases.
And this is what we've always come back to. Politicians ain't shit without order followers.
Exactly.
They're just a bunch of stuffed suits jerking each other off in a fancy fucking building.
And that we may, if these sheriffs live up to this, we may actually see that demonstrated in a very real way here.
Oh, God, make the Sagebrush Rebellion great again.
Where they're just like, where all of these sheriffs are just like, no, I'm not prosecuting it. And obviously most local, and it's a reality, most local small town police departments are not going to go against what the county sheriff wants. Whether they're subordinate to him or not, they're just not going to bother. Mm-hmm. So what you're going to see is none of this gets enforced, and they're going to be like, but it's the law, and they're going to be like, but I don't care. And all of a sudden, the politicians as well are also going to have to face that reality, because what it sounds like the way he's saying this is that he honestly believes that simply by writing words on paper, they become reality.
Yep. Yeah. And let's not forget the fact that the sheriffs are elected
What a fucking
officials.
Delusion.
Right? Yeah. And these sheriffs saying, oh, we're not going to enforce this law. If they enforce that law, they're fucked.
Yeah, they get voted out and replaced with somebody who won't.
Yeah. Yeah. And nobody's mentioned this yet, and I don't know why, but it wouldn't just be the National Guard. There's the state police, too. Mm-hmm. And state police are way bigger assholes than small town sheriffs.
Oh, they're completely the law is the law. They're borderline Judge Dredd, the state police.
Yeah.
Oh, we have really the CHP here. The state police.
Dude, the CHP are the ones who tried to arrest me and my buddy because we accidentally strayed into California by 1,000 feet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then turned around and came back. And then when he realized that he couldn't arrest us because he didn't even turn on his lights until we were already more than a mile back into Nevada, got pissed off and was all mad because, well, you don't have anything that would be admissible in court anyway, and wanted to arrest us. And we're like, but you don't have any jurisdiction. So I don't know what you're hoping for here. Like,
where do you think this is going to go?
Yeah, like what? Yeah. You're going to arrest us? No, I'm not getting out of the vehicle. I'm going to drive away.
This is going to end with me suing you for wasting my resources with a bullshit fucking arrest.
Yeah, exactly. It was just, it was absurd. It was, but that's the CHP. So yeah, they're complete dicks.
Yeah,
they're complete dicks.
And Virginia has a big state police presence because a lot of Virginia is very rural, so like the state police are huge in and around all these counties that are claiming 2A sanctuary status now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I believe that the sheriffs legitimately don't want to fucking enforce this and they'll do everything they can to resist. Some will stop within the bounds of the law, and some won't. Some will be like, no, fuck you. Our county's going down shooting. Come get us.
Yeah, state troopers are the same way here in Wisconsin. They're more than happy to just go to war with county sheriffs all frickin' day because they think they are the be all end all. They are the top dog.
And do you really want to be that sheriff or that deputy that arrests a member of the military to enforce this BS gun control?
Yeah, I don't think so. Not like in places where I live. I would probably guess 80% of the sheriff's staff, 80% of the sheriff's department is veterans.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they are, and even the ones who aren't, they're all very. I mean, at least in around here, because we're so rural around here, outside of La Crosse County, most of the county sheriffs are, because our county sheriff is a piece of shit, but most of the other ones, once you get into more rural areas, they go shooting with most of these guys. They talk guns with most of these guys. This is what they do all day because most of them grew up in that area.
Yeah.
They're friends. You're asking all of these sheriffs to enforce a law that they find to be unconstitutional inherently against their friends and neighbors.
And their friends, family, neighbors. Yeah.
They're never going to do that. Like the sheriffs actually aren't going to do that.
Right. I don't think so either. So,
well, and if you're a rural county sheriff, you live in a rural area, most likely. Mm-hmm. Your house is fairly isolated, vulnerable. You know what could potentially happen if things get to the point of a second civil war.
And rural areas have a much stronger sense of community than anybody who lives in an urban environment can even really understand.
Wow.
So,
yeah, so we covered those last two articles, or I think I had two articles. Because I wanted to cover this one, and this takes it a step further, in my opinion. It's a huge step, I don't know if it's an actual step, but it's a huge step. But Tazwell County is in eastern Virginia. It's on the West Virginia border. Tazwell County becomes Second Amendment sanctuary, and adds a militia ordinance during the meeting. During a widely attended. Tazwell County joined the ranks of the Second Amendment sanctuary counties on Tuesday and took it one step further. Before a crowd of more than 200, the Board of Supervisors unanimously passed two resolutions during their meeting on Tuesday night. The Second Amendment sanctuary resolution and a resolution promoting the order of militia within Tazwell County both passed to loud cheers from a crowd that overflowed the 189-seat boardroom.
And you know what? They're perfectly within their rights according to the Virginia Constitution, the state constitution. Now, most people don't know this, but the Virginia state constitution dictates to the counties that they are to maintain militias.
Mm-hmm.
Each county is supposed to, by Virginia Constitution, have its own militia, has a right to have its own militia.
Well, yeah. And that, I mean, and that goes back to, the fact that Virginia was one of the founding states of the United States where you needed militias, and they were founded when the U.S. was remembered that we were never supposed to have a standing army. We were supposed to have only militias. And technically, that's also authorized by the Second Amendment, which, mentions the militia.
Right. I mean, Thomas Jefferson,
free state,
Thomas Jefferson wrote the shit. All right. The guy who wrote all these papers we're talking about, all these historical documents, he lived an hour and 30 minutes from where I live right now on the other side of Fredericksburg. You can go to Monticello. You can visit it. You can see where he lived. This is the dude that wrote the fucking Constitution. Well, he had a hand in writing the Virginia Constitution.
Yeah. Board chairman Travis Hackworth announced at the beginning of the meeting that both resolutions would be unanimously passed. Hackworth said board members started getting messages from state legislators following the November 5th election, which saw the Democrats take control of both the House of Delegates and the state Senate for the first time in 25 years. He said elected officials expressed concern that legislation might pass that would chip away at Second Amendment rights.
chip away. That's
It
putting
completely
fucking...
obliterates them.
Yeah.
Southern District Supervisor Mike Hims contacted Antrim County Attorney Chase Collins and had him get a copy of the sanctuary county legislation passed in Carroll County, one of the first counties in the state to pass the resolution protecting gun rights, and similar resolutions from other localities. Quote, we went through them with 3 attorneys. It was not our intent to water anything down. We wanted something with teeth in it, something that we could use to file an injunction and defend in court. So County Administrator Eric Young, one of the attorneys, along with Collins and Eric Whitesell, who helped draft the ordinance, said the resolutions allow the county to take action in the event that state or federal laws are passed violating the Second Amendment. So they're not fucking around. Just
nope.
Saying. So.
Nope.
Well, and it's turning into this really big standoff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the direction that it's going. Is going to be.
I mean, right now it's like, obviously, right now it's saber rattling.
Yeah.
But it has the potential. I mean, the longer the saber rattling goes on, the more worked up and emotional people are going to get, and it's going to turn into a fucking powder keg, and it's going to explode.
So, let's see. Both resolutions call for the elimination of funding to any law enforcement or any enforcement of laws that infringe upon the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms. Stacy and other board members said a concern of state leaders might cut off funding for the county or remove elected officials who refuse to enforce state law, prompted them to pass the militia ordinance. Quote, our position is that Article 1, Section 13 of the Constitution of Virginia reserves the right to order militia to the localities. Therefore, counties, not the state, determine what type of arms may be carried in their territory and by whom. So we are ordering the militia by making sure everyone can own a weapon.
Yeah, which is what the militia was always supposed to be. No, the National Guard is not the fucking militia.
Nope.
So,
but good luck
when people say that.
Yeah, but I mean, good luck explaining any of that to
people who don't want to hear it.
Yeah, to the hoplophobes out there and everything else. They want to, they ignore that I'm trying to remember the exact legal phrasing. Like is it prepositional? Is it the prepositional clause? Preparatory clause. That what it's talking about is when it says well-regulated militias, it's talking about a well-maintained militia, and they want to co-opt the 18th century phrase well-regulated and make it about what we think of with regulations now. And if you try and explain to them all of that, even if you use the source documents from the original sources, they will still try and argue, or they'll just default to but they meant like muskets. Okay, but so by that logic, so the First Amendment doesn't apply to computers or the glossy magazines, because they couldn't have possibly had a conception that would exist.
Right.
Let's see, and then quote from this guy says, therefore could own a weapon. The sanctuary resolution cites the Second Amendment of the Constitution, which states, quote, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Him said he knew what his constituents wanted and asked for the amendment last month. Quote, we live in an area where the nearest deputy might be 45 minutes away. People feel the need to have a gun to protect themselves and their property, he said. In addition to allowing the county to order a militia, the ordinance calls for concealed weapons training for all residents of the county who are eligible to own a gun, and teaching of firearm safety in public schools.
Yeah.
Both the sheriff and the newly elected Commonwealth attorney both expressed their support for the resolution and the belief that the Constitution of the United States supersedes state laws.
Because it does.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're like concealed weapon permit training, like that's the teeth. That's what they're talking about. They put teeth behind their Second Amendment sanctuary statement.
Yeah. Not only are they saying we will not enforce these laws, they're also saying, and not only us, but the citizenry will resist your attempts to alter that non-enforcement by force if necessary.
Now,
Yes.
I will say it's a little easier for them to be that brave because they are a long way from Richmond.
Yeah, they're on the
West, other side of the fucking mountains from
on
Richmond.
The West Virginia line.
Yeah.
They're in Okie land.
Yeah. Yeah. And people from Virginia don't like getting too close to West Virginia. Right? They're a little scared of it. I'm just saying.
Well,
so it's like the crazy cousin sitting like looking over your fucking shoulder.
West Virginia is kind of a state of crazy cousins. It's just, it's very. I've been to West Virginia a few times. It is. That's a place. Yep.
Yeah. My dad's side of the family lives in West Virginia. There's a Booth Mountain back there, and there is old school coal miners. My grandfather started coal mining at 13. He died of black lung. So
living in the yeller or the hollers.
Yep.
Not the yellers, the hollers.
The yellers.
The yellers.
Yeah. I'm just picturing some really screwed up hybrid of Star Wars Empire Strikes Back opening and Old Yeller there. I thought.
Well, I was saying yell instead of like holler. You know, you yell for someone because that's why they're called hollers, because you can holler at every one of your neighbors, right?
So
yeah, yellers. I'm a fucking retard.
So and just for
I'm high.
Yeah. And I actually posted this article in Wolf earlier. I don't know why I didn't add it to our little queue, but I'm bringing it up. And it's yes, Virginia, the governor really can use the National Guard to enforce gun control.
That is true.
Yeah.
Let's see. Blah 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 talks about blah blah blah, and it says the president, as commander-in-chief of the armed forces, is the only person who can nationalize the Guard, but state governors have the latitude to use it to enforce state law, legal experts say. Quote, until nationalized, it's a creature of the state. So that's what leads me to believe that, yes, the governor can activate the National Guard to enforce the state law, says Gary Solis, military law professor at Georgetown University. Amy Swearer, a legal political analyst who works on gun control issues, agreed that the governor has the right to use Virginia National Guard to enforce the law, though it would break from past mobilizations. So, quote, when you look at the historical reality, the governors or presidents have mobilized the National Guard is to enforce the rights of citizens that were being infringed upon. But to suggest the National Guard would be brought into otherwise peaceful jurisdictions to enforce restrictions on constitutional rights, that would be a completely unprecedented in terms of how the National Guard has been used when it's been mobilized to restore law and order.
Yeah.
So, quote, I don't necessarily foresee it coming to that situation, or essentially see the political back and forth of the state and local officials using the respective authority to get back at each other. Then it goes on to talk about the Posse Comitatus Act strictly limits how military can be used to enforce law, but the National Guard's unique status as a state unit is an exception. Many governors have activated the National Guard to enforce the law in the past.
Yeah, and like Kent State.
Kent State, yeah. Katrina, following Charlottesville in 2017. And then specifically mentioned here, 1954, Arkansas governor directed the National Guard to, quote, preserve the public peace by turning back black students during the court-mandated integration of Little Rock Central High School.
And what was the political orientation of that governor? I mean, what side of the fence did he sit on? Oh wait, I remember. He was a Democrat. Hey, I'm noticing a trend here.
Yep.
So, yeah.
But what kills me about the whole situation, though, is that all these people are like, you know, the first guy's like, I'm going to do this to the law. And the other person's like, you can't do that. That's against the law. And then they're, you know, and then they say, well, we won't follow that. And then the other person says, you can't do that. That's against the law. And then the next person says, you can't do that. That's against the law. That's all this fight is at this point, is all of them fucking trying to make the paperwork fit what they want to fucking do.
And what's funny is like, even the people in the sanctuary, even the sheriffs and whatnot, we're not going to enforce gun control. They still enforce gun control. They just don't want to enforce this new gun control. They still enforce the old gun control. So they're ignoring the law, which is the Second Amendment. So
they're perfectly happy to enforce the gun control that was on the books prior. It's just like they've drawn a line in the sand where they've been like, okay, well, this is a little too far now.
Really, this time we mean it. This just crosses the line.
Yeah,
look,
the water in the pot's getting a little hot, guys.
The
water in the pot's a little hot. Come on now.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why because I keep getting that question from people that are like, well, do you think that, the National Guard, do you think that the military would really enforce gun control? And my answer is always yes, I absolutely do.
Yeah,
I see
Katrina, they went door to door.
Yep, without a second thought. They had no problem with it. And
without warrants, without due process.
It's been demonstrated before. It gets demonstrated time and time again. Orders are orders. Ours is not to ask and wonder why. And
there were National Guard at Waco.
Yep.
They had no problem. They have no problem enforcing any edict by the government that the government says, hey, you need to go do this.
Was there National Guard at Ruby Ridge?
I
think those were federal.
Yeah, I don't think there was
were like federal boys.
State.
Yeah. I think Ruby Ridge was ABC boys.
That was all alphabeties.
Yeah.
I think it was Marshals and FBI, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there was any, but yeah, I mean, they're demonstrating that again and again, and you notice in the most recent with that statement from the National Guard, they basically said, yeah, we'll just obey orders and you guys can worry about it later and it's not our problem. And police, by and large, most police, most National Guard, most U.S. Army, Navy, Marine Corps especially will just follow orders without giving a friggin' thought to what's going on. The Air Force, they're all going to enforce anything against the American people that the government asks them to do because it's an order and theirs is not to ask questions, just do it. Yeah. They already do it. They do it all the time.
And I'm a little less certain that they'll do it on a large scale. They'll do it when it's one person that they can be told is a terrorist or you're, a sleeper cell of this or that or whatever. But if it's on a large scale, county to county, thousands of people in every county,
they'll back up red flag. That's what it'll be.
Well, yeah, they'll back up red flag stuff. But like the military, like forces, yeah, they'll follow orders overseas. Those are the other people. These are my people. Like even in the military, that, Andrew, there's like that America, this is my land that I'm fighting for. These are my people. And I think at some point, if the conflict becomes big enough, the military is going to be like, no, fuck this. No, these are the people we are supposed to protect. Some of them, a lot of them.
Whoa, it was not
all of them.
It was not the National Guard at Waco. It was the actual Army.
Wow.
Yeah, from Fort Bliss.
Yeah.
So case in point.
And see, Waco, Waco, they were able to do with a clean conscience because the guy was a, religious fundamentalist and he was abusing children and, you know what I mean?
Well, but that's all they're going to do though, is it's going to be, but these people are terrorists and okay, they're terrorists. And then this person is this person is this person is this person. Yeah. And they're just going to keep going.
That's what I'm saying. If they do it one by one, like person by person, but if the counties, like the sheriffs and stuff, get together and fucking push back as kind of like, make them deal with all of us at once. Mm-hmm. I think the military will back down.
Now you have way more faith in the average person.
I probably do.
Ability to think independently.
I always want to have faith in people.
I think I would love to see a Bundy style reaction to happenings in Virginia.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see it, but I would say that the majority of people who are actually willing to put their money where their mouth is, including in the military, who are saying, well, I wouldn't do that. I'm going to never fight against the American people. That's wrong. I'd say it's about 15% or less.
Well, yeah, if it gets put to them right away, I think I agree with you. But in my opinion, the longer this saber rattling goes on between the counties and the state, the longer people have to think about this and make up their minds and decide what side they're going to be on.
Well,
you know.
uh,
So like the governor wants to move fast with that, so they don't have time to think.
you guys know I'm a prepper. I'm not closed about that, but we have discussed like the military intervention in a prepper and a shithead the advanced scenario, and the consensus is about half the military would sit out as neutral, like we're not going to interfere,
Right.
and then the other 25%, the majority of the younger military tends to fall on the conservative side of things, but the upper echelon in the military is largely liberal.
Yep.
And the Limas, the loyalists, they would back the government, and the lower echelon people, the non-enlisted, it's like half of them, would go with the program, and the other half would simple sabotage or walk away.
I don't think that I would give any butter bars credence to be aware of the world enough to say no. And they would just go do it without ever questioning. And it's, I mean, because we all know, I mean, anybody who's been in the military knows you deal with an LT. That LT is just going to go by whatever the book says, and he's not going to question it.
Which both of you are military veterans, and right. So you have credence in this discussion. I'm just a untrained civilian grunt.
Untrained civilian. But that's what it is, though. And it's, and I look at it, and what I think is going, what I can see happening is, especially if you really get 50% of the military just flat out refusing, at that point, there is a huge military force, which is going to have to move in, because now America is descending into civil war, and they need somebody to come keep the peace.
Yeah, it sounds an awful lot like some international, maybe peacekeeping type of thing. Maybe we could recognize them if they all wore some kind of helmet that was
like
all
a
the
bright
same
blue, maybe.
Maybe, yes, something like that, with some kind of recognizable emblem.
Bright blue helmets make the greatest flower pots.
Yeah.
And you know what? And to be sure that no one confuses those vehicles for what maybe the bad people have seized from the military stores and police stores, we'll paint them all white so that they're really recognizable, and that they're only there for peace. Those machine guns, those are peacekeeping machine guns.
Right. Look, we're painted white. That means we're on the good side.
Yeah,
obviously.
And that's what's going to happen. Like,
but then the letters are written in black. So I mean,
well, that's just contrast. It's because things are black and white. They're either right or wrong. That's what.
Oh yeah, of course. Because that's the way it works. So
but I mean, that's what you're going to see. Is you're going to see if enough of the military really will not enforce what the government's saying, and they're willing to pick up arms against their former brothers and against the government that was paying their paychecks. If they're really willing to do that, at that point, the United States government goes to the UN, which is located conveniently in New York City, and they're going to go, "Hey, we need help here. We're descending into civil war." Yep. And because the United States economy is so important to the global economy, the UN will then just be forced to send enormous numbers of troops in.
Isn't there a big, huge statue in front of the UN building? What is it? It's like a gun with the barrel, and the barrel's tied into a big knot.
Yeah, I feel like there might be a thing there that's encouraging, and I feel like we know about these things because I feel like this might be some sort of an agenda that might have been brought up.
Haven't there been like 20 agendas before this one?
30.
Yeah, something like that.
30. Agenda 30. Just go read it.
Yeah, and this is the direction that everything's very clearly progressing, and what your bigger concern than local military, to be honest with you, is going to be the UN,
the United Nations. Yeah. All
right, blue helmets make pretty targets.
Yeah. Well, UN peacekeepers aren't known for their bravery.
Well, see, but that's the thing, though, is that in general, the biggest nations, the nations that do UN peacekeeping most often in the world are like India, Pakistan, Ireland. In fact, the Irish armed forces, the only combat that any of them has ever seen has been on peacekeeping missions. Because Ireland, it's in our constitution that we are not allowed to wage aggressive wars. You see Germany a lot, you see France a lot, and in general, because no one cares about the places that they've gone, they're not really going to do much. But when you are talking about an armed conflict in the United States,
yeah, that's world changing. That's like World War III.
Isn't the U.S. like half the funding of the UN?
Right, exactly.
At least,
or something like that.
Yeah.
Which means, and most
funding,
of the
hosting, military support.
Yeah, I was gonna say most of the defense contractors that supply the weapons for everyone else are here in the United States.
That's another wild card that scares me is defense contractors.
Yeah.
What direction do they go?
Number one, what direction they go? I read an article the other day about there have been more defense contractors killed in Afghanistan than U.S. troops.
I believe it.
There's obviously a lot of them out there, and
PMCs,
that concerns me.
I can say having dealt
most of them live in Virginia too. I'm just saying.
Yeah, having dealt with a lot of trunk monkeys, I can tell you that the majority of them are not going to help the government with that.
I hope so.
That is not something that they're okay with. That's
because the head of the guy that created Blackwater, Eric, whatever his face is, he just met with Maduro. I love
that he still gets branded as the guy who founded Blackwater, ignoring the fact that it's not even Blackwater anymore.
It's like
it's XE now.
I think they changed it again actually.
After XE, because it was Blackwater and then it was Academy, and then the last I heard was it was XE.
Yeah. Well,
I was gonna say the thing about defense contractors, like the big ones that do a lot of combat zone stuff, or even the ones who work in like rebuilding after conflict and things like that, they're responsible for a lot of militia training. That's essentially what it is in localities that have to be rebuilt after a war. A lot of times they come in and they have to train the populace how to defend themselves. They arm them and train them how to defend themselves. So a lot of them are already oriented with the mindset that communities should be able to defend themselves, and it's a necessary thing, and they're used to encouraging that.
And guess where most of the top defense contractors come from? They come from the special operations community. Guess what community within the military has the highest number of anarchists and libertarians?
Yeah,
the special operations community. So you can see where this is probably gonna go.
Yeah.
Well, Eric Prince is the brother of Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos.
Really?
Yeah. That's
interesting.
That's very interesting.
And also keep in mind, speaking of Blackwater, keep in mind that Blackwater / Academy / XE / whatever the hell they're trying to call themselves now, it's always been the same company with the same facilities. They're the ones who, in general, get charged with the most war crimes, get accused of the most war crimes. They're the ones who are the most in bed with the American government. That particular PMC, I can see the company siding with the U.S. government without question. However, there are others that Triple Canopy is one for sure that I can think of. G4S Wackenhut.
Constellus Group?
Yeah, I think DynCorp would be kind of on the fence. It's hard to say. I think most of their actual contractors would probably side with the people, but the company itself will go with the government. Because DynCorp is also a very, very in bed with the U.S. government contractor. So that's, once you get into the world of PMCs, it gets interesting. I've had job offers, so I've learned about them. But they're interesting. They're really strange, and they're given so much leeway to arm themselves in ways that normal companies can't. With like actual tanks and attack helicopters and like real artillery, and so things are a little different with them. And I think if anyone's going to be the allies you want to go after in the event of a Boogaloo, that's going to be them.
Defense contractor. Yep.
Yeah, because they're the ones with all of the big fun stuff.
Yeah. And they've got all the same training and better training than most of the rest of the military, definitely better. And theirs was a unique type of position within the military, when they come from special ops. And so special ops has a very kind of, well, Andrew knows more about it than I do, but they leave your free will intact when you're in special ops because they need you to be able to think on your feet and think for yourself. You're not as much an order follower as, the grunts and the infantry or whatever. Like, so those people, they're not just going to follow orders. They're going to think about it.
You're expected to ask those questions. Even at the lowest levels of JSOC, where you hit like the Rangers, even the Rangers are expected to be far more free thinkers than Big Army is. And people really, especially with the way the modern battlefield has changed, the way things get deployed, they have started to think of the Rangers as Big Army, and they're not. They are still actually special operations. They're considered spec ops. So, but like guys like the SEALs, the Green Berets, the PJs, true special operations, even I would wager even some OGA guys, the actual operators for them are probably going to be like, no, screw this. Because, you want to talk about free thinkers. The actual agency guys are very free thinkers. They're very objective.
And autonomous.
Yeah, so they're very likely to go, no, screw you guys. This is why would you do that and refuse to assist? So it would get awful interesting,
Yeah. What that all boils down to is I don't think there's going to be any way of really predicting numbers for the ones that become loyalists and the ones that side with the people. I don't know that there's any way of predicting numbers, really.
It's a coin flip.
No.
Yep.
And that's scary, in my opinion.
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing. Because we're talking about, Civil War II, the Electric Boogaloo here, where it was the same thing in the first Civil War, like leading up to it and the last few months before South Carolina seceded and the first wave of secession happened. A lot of people, and even leading up to the second wave, which is when places like Virginia and Texas and things seceded, that was a largely, coin flip thing with who stayed loyal to the state and who went with the federal government. That was you never knew which one of these officers was going to pack up and go over to the other side, or, and it's really interesting. And there's some guys, like, Johnston, I think it was not Joseph E., the other one, who was technically going to side with Texas, but flat out refused to defy the Federals until he'd officially resigned his commission. He's like, nope, as long as this is my job and that's who I'm working for, I refuse to defy them. And then the moment that he was out, then he decided to start fighting against him. So who knows what's going to happen? You might have a bunch of officers resigning commissions and then coming over. You might have enlisted men who just kind of wait their time out and then come over. It's hard to say.
But I'm going to say, though, that officers don't have the loyalty that they used to have from their men. Modern military officers don't have the same loyalty that, the Civil War leaders, like the officers of units.
Oh, no.
They don't.
People themselves are entirely different than.
It used to be that it was like a county became a unit, right? And they had an officer from that county, and that was their unit that went off to war. But now, an officer, they're switching commands every 3 years, and all the people in their command are all on their own 3-year rotations, or 4-year, 2-year, whatever they're doing. And so like they have constant turnover of people. So I don't think we can even, like it used to be an officer went and he took his whole unit with him. It's definitely not going to be like that. This is an individual's war, like on both sides.
Yeah, and officers, And anyone could be an officer when you look at the birth of the Civil War. I mean, in fact, there's the Civil War still manages to hold the dubious distinction of being the only armed conflict in the United States history where a sitting U.S. senator was killed because he was leading his own unit in, I believe it was Tennessee. It might have been Kentucky. I don't remember. It was right on a border state, but he was leading his own unit, and he was a sitting U.S. senator, and was killed in combat leading a unit that he had personally raised and was personally commanding.
Right.
Which is just bizarre.
That's a level of badass.
It's bizarre to us.
That's a level of badassery, though.
Yeah. Like in modern history, we've never seen anything like that. It was really common back then. These statesmen were expected to be military leaders too, and to raise their militias and lead them into battle if necessary. That was always expected of like the county, the leaders of the counties and things like that, but not anymore.
Or the businessmen too. A lot of the businessmen did it and they raised their own armies. And I mean,
he
was
anybody
really
somewhat influential was seen to have.
Yeah, and he was really strange too because he was actually a senator from Oregon. However, he was a close personal friend of Abraham Lincoln. In fact, Abraham Lincoln's second son was named after him. They were such close friends. But the unit that he was commanding was like the 4th California was what it was called, except it was made up entirely of men from Pennsylvania.
What the hell?
But everyone called it the California because he wanted it called the California because he'd always been associated with the state of California somehow and wanted them represented the Eastern theater of war. It's the weirdest damn story. It's anybody listening, you Google that one because it is one of the weirdest stories you've ever heard, and it's
patchwork right there.
The California regiment led by a guy from Oregon made up of people from Pennsylvania fighting in Tennessee.
So all right,
that should tell the world Americans really don't give a fuck. If there's a way, we'll find it.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the big things that is going to matter in the Boogaloo is communication, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Congress warns tech companies, take action on encryption or we will.
Ugh.
Congress sent a warning to tech giants on Tuesday, telling companies that it intends to pass legislation to regulate encryption if Silicon Valley can't reach an acceptable compromise with law enforcement agencies. Tech companies and privacy advocates have long supported encryption, noting that the privacy and security technology protects people from hackers, crooks, and authoritarian governments. Law enforcement officials, however, argue that encryption blocks criminal investigations by preventing access to suspects' devices and their communications on messaging apps.
Yeah, that's kind of its point, is to keep people from getting in who you don't want to get in. That's kind of the definition of encryption.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think we fucking do it?
Yeah. What?
Like the Fourth Amendment, all right? We've talked about, I mean, they're words on paper, but I mean, if you're going to have a...
Yeah, I mean, everything we're discussing here is pretty much through the prism of statism and what their own fucking papers say.
Well,
everybody knows
Fourth
we're
Amendment,
anarchists,
right?
and
Come on now.
Right now, we're just chewing over the absurdity of all their fucking words.
And what it's about is it's about the hypocrisy. It's about the hypocrisy of saying, well, these words on paper matter, but those words don't.
Right. Exactly.
These words on paper matter because we wrote them and we want them enforced.
Because I agree with these, damn it.
Because
those over there don't, because I don't agree with them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it is. I mean, the Fourth Amendment names your right to be protected from illegal search and seizure. And then time and time again, the federal courts go, oh, sorry, were you under the impression that meant you were protected from illegal search and seizure? No. We mean that other guy is protected from illegal search and seizure.
FISA court.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sealed court indictment. It's
Patriot Act.
Yeah, NDAA, which people seem to have recently become aware of, but has actually been around for a very, very long time. That where they can suspend the writ of habeas corpus at will on an individual basis in the name of national security.
Under the Patriot Act, Donald Trump recently became the very first president to use the Patriot Act to detain a person for the rest of their life without any sort of charges.
Trial.
Yeah, no habeas corpus whatsoever.
He was a Palestinian, and we had him here, but we were going to release him, but Israel, or they didn't want him over there, and no other country would take him, and so now he's in jail for life because freedom.
Granted, he's probably a piece of shit.
He's absolutely a piece of shit, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, he might be a murderous son of a bitch, but it doesn't matter. It's if you're not willing to say, well, yeah, you may be a murderer, but the government doesn't have a right to just declare you a murderer and a horrible person and throw you in prison. If you're not willing to say that and say it doesn't matter what you're guilty of, they can't just do that. If you're not willing to say that, you are not in favor of freedom or justice.
Yep. Yep. Because that's not justice. Even if you think he's a piece of shit, even if every piece of evidence makes him look like a piece of shit, in your eyes, there is always a slim possibility that you've got the wrong fucking guy. That's why you have to, if you're going to believe in this system, you have to let it work. If you're going to claim that this system fucking works and expect people to obey it, you have to let it fucking work.
Well, and even if all of the evidence is overwhelming and there is no doubt in anyone's mind that he's guilty, it doesn't matter if he hasn't actually gone through a trial. The evidence hasn't all been presented and people have all really looked at it and gone, yes, no, he's definitely guilty, and he's had a chance to defend
himself. And because evidence can be fucking fabricated. We know that. The cops do it all the fucking time.
I don't care if you shoot someone in the head on national television.
Yeah.
You still have a right to a trial. You still have a right to speak in your own defense. You still have those rights, even if there is no doubt in anyone's mind that you did what you did, because we can watch you have done it. It doesn't matter. You still have a right to this regardless.
And it's not because you're a human being. It's because if everybody doesn't have this right, then nobody fucking does. It doesn't exist.
Hold on. That's where this article gets to. It says, several lawmakers at the hearing warned representatives that Congress would look into legislation if the companies couldn't provide data to law enforcement agencies. Quote, my advice to you is to get on with it, said Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, and Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman. Quote, this time next year, if you haven't found a way that you can live with it, we will impose our will upon you. This was a bipartisan warning. Both Democrats and Republicans argue that investigating crimes is more important than the overall privacy and security on devices.
Think about that for a second. How would the founding fathers of the United States respond to that one?
With gunshots.
Security is more important than liberty.
They'd respond to that with a fucking noose.
Hold on. It gets even better. Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, called out big tech's distancing itself from legal responsibility and warned that lawmakers would soon take action. Quote, that will end because the American people are losing patience, Blumenthal said. Quote, I hope you take that message back. That's that kind of immunity will be short-lived if big tech isn't able to do better.
The American people want to be left the fuck alone.
We're losing patience with you, you fuckwad. You totally misinterpreted our lack of patience, dickface.
Yeah, we don't have a lack of patience with them. We're losing patience with you, you fucking tyrant.
All right, one more. Quote, if it doesn't happen by you, it will happen by Congress, said Senator Joni Ernst, a Republican from Iowa. Quote, I think you'd rather find a solution than have Congress do it for you.
What a shocker that the Republicans would lead a charge against civil liberties like this.
Say it ain't so.
Oh, what a shock.
It's not just Republicans, though, because we just got done talking about Democrats also leading a charge against civil liberties.
Yeah.
It's all fucking politicians. They are not our fucking friends.
Well, that's
They
exactly
are our
yeah.
enemies.
That was exactly the point I was making too. Is like,
Yeah.
understand, we've been making fun of Democrats here and poking at them.
Yep.
Republicans, you're next, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
We're coming at you now.
All right.
Yeah.
One more. There are no
True.
proposals for any legislation tied to encryption in the U.S., but senators at the hearing have warned tech giants that Congress will take action if the issue continues to trouble law enforcement agencies. Quote, "You all have to get your act together, or we will gladly get your act together for you," said Senator Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee. Quote, "This is not going to continue."
That's like the essence. That is the distilled essence of government, what she said. You better get your act together or we will get your act together for you. That is the distilled fucking essence of hubris and tyranny.
Yep.
Do as we are ordering you, or we will find a way to force you to comply with our demands.
That's exactly
Yes.
what government is.
And you know, and
man.
it's so funny because I remember everyone laughing about when Obama said, unfortunately, our founding fathers put in place a set of rules that make it very difficult for me to act the way that I would like to on this issue. Remember when he said that? And everyone...
that was about
That was the most honest
that
thing he
one
ever
thing.
said.
No, actually, the most honest thing he said is when he talked about breed-specific legislation going unfairly against pit bulls.
Yeah, and he said that it made no sense and took into account no logic or any statistics or anything. Yeah,
And
but
Andrew and I are both big pit bull fans.
Yeah. But I mean, he said that not terribly long ago, and isn't it interesting that we've come from everyone laughing about that?
It was the most accidentally honest thing he
Oh
ever
yeah,
said. Yeah,
but I mean,
that's what I meant.
Isn't it interesting though that we've come in such a short amount of time from everybody, especially Republicans, celebrating the fact that yes, this was put in place to prevent you from doing this, and no, it's not okay that you were to do this, and we've gone from that in just a few short years of Trump's presidency to Republicans going, you need to ignore the Fourth Amendment because we say so, and I don't care what the Constitution has to say.
Yeah.
First and fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the Overton window before and how
it's not even Overton window anymore. It's an Overton sliding glass door.
Yeah. It moves so quick. It's just keeps sliding, and you see it every day where the extreme rhetoric of 5 years ago is mainstream today.
The Overton window is like the Price is Right wheel.
Yeah. For real.
All right. All right. I need to calm down. All right. Landlords must rent first come first serve. Washington State High Court says.
This makes me crazy.
This article is the article's fine, but the logic behind this law is just all right.
There is no logic behind it. These people do not understand the ripples that this will cause.
The Washington Supreme Court ruled in favor of a Seattle law that requires landlords to rent on first come first served basis in what's called the quote first in time rule. Okay. Landlords first have to write and publish a list of requirements for prospective tenants. The state doesn't determine those, so they can be anything that the landlord wants that's legal, like a minimum credit score or income, requirements around rental history, or even things like applicant must remove shoes while visiting unit. Then the first person who fulfills those requirements and turns in an application has to be offered the unit.
So what's the point in even turning in an application? And what's the point in having an application process?
Hold on. The goal of the rule is to eliminate the scenario in which a landlord sifts between or slips or the goal of the rule is to eliminate the scenario in which a landlord sifts through a stack of qualified applicants and chooses someone they like the most for whatever reason. The law's
Well, that
drafters.
person's going to be living in their fucking house.
Yeah.
Hold
Well,
on. Hold on. The law's drafters say the aim is to eliminate both conscious and unconscious bias from the rental process. Landlords selecting tenants based on their names, age, sexual orientation, or anything else.
that's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard.
And you
And
know
I'm
what it's
someone-
going to do? It is going to, like, there goes any affordable housing that might have been left in Seattle, of which there was not much to begin with.
No.
So all the affordable housing now is going to be fucking gone. Because what landlords are going to do is they're going to raise the rent until they are only getting the exact fucking applicant that they want that can fucking afford it.
Yep.
Or they're going to institute requirements where X amount of rent needs to be paid in advance, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. No more first and last. It's going to be, I need prepayment. And if you can prepay me, then I'll accept your application. And that's going to be what's going to happen, which means anybody who isn't making $100,000 a year can no longer live in the city of Seattle. Yep. They're all going to have to leave. And then what's going to happen is then the government's going to go, oh, well, we have all these homeless people, or we have all of these, these people who are having commute. We need to build affordable housing. And, oh, by the way, we're exempt from that rule.
Right. Yeah. And then the next step, of course, is landlords are also going to be setting those requirements, right? And the requirements are going to become very vague so that the landlord can interpret them how they want. Yep. And then because the landlords are getting around this law like that, then the state's going to step in and start setting the requirements that landlords have to fucking ask for when they're looking for renters. And it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse the longer you go into it.
Yep. And then eventually the landlords are all going to sell their properties because there's no point in even trying to own rental properties anymore. So they're going to sell all the rental properties. They're all going to be up for sale. Nothing's going to be for rent. Everything's going to be for sale. And now even people who are making $100,000 a year in Seattle, because the cost of living is so high, can't afford to buy a house there.
No.
So now,
and you've also driven all of your service industry people out to longer fucking drives and shittier cars to get to work. And you've increased traffic. You've increased the wear and tear on infrastructure. You've made bigger problems for childcare, for single parents, that need childcare. You've created so many more problems, and now there's more stress on the schools outside the city, and then it becomes very elitist in the city, and only the rich kids get to go to those schools.
Seattle isn't already elite.
Yeah, right, right.
There goes the bikini barista jobs.
Although I see a light at the end of the tunnel, because at the end of this, as goes Detroit, so goes Seattle. And if we can turn Seattle into the same kind of wasteland that Detroit has become,
I'll buy some shit in Seattle. I'll buy some fucking property there.
I'll move to the PNW.
I'll move to Seattle. Hell yeah.
So
I'm fucking there if I can get a house for like $30,000. Fuck you, I'm gone, Virginia.
Oh, you can buy houses right now in Detroit for $1,000.
Oh well,
you can buy. There's I looked recently at an article.
At that point, you just tear down what's there and build what you want on the property.
Oh yeah, no, I was looking at an article recently that was talking about Detroit and property values, and there are 4 different sections of 2 or more entire city blocks for sale for $150,000 or less in Detroit. You can literally buy an entire city block,
and yet. Now, there are real estate hungry investors. Like, this country is lousy with them. And yet nobody is investing in Detroit. And why is that? Detroit still has their over-the-top, hysterically socialist Democrat fucking government. And that's why nobody will invest in Detroit.
Just like Seattle.
Yeah.
The law was passed back in 2016, but it was almost immediately challenged in the courts, and the city initially lost. The recent decision by the state Supreme Court overturns the earlier ruling. The landlord's lawyers, the Libertarian Pacific Legal Foundation, I am a huge fan of the PLF, argued that the law is unconstitutional because it's a government taking of private property. They say it takes away the right of the landlords to do what they want with their property. The lawyers also argued that it violates landlords' right to free speech. The court rejected both those arguments, saying its decision that the law is definitely an experiment, but not unconstitutional one. They decided it's not taking of private property. It only requires disclosure, which isn't a violation of free speech.
So even though
Disclosure, you're
landlords,
telling them the decision they can make.
yeah, even though landlords are running a business, they don't have the right to refuse service to anyone, just like other businesses do.
Mhm.
Well, and I'm against this, and keep in mind, I'm against this coming from a person who has been turned down by more rental properties than I can count because my credit score wasn't good enough, or because they just didn't like me, or because of my background.
Yep.
They didn't like me because of who I was, because of my politics, because I'm so outspoken. I've been turned down for all sorts of reasons, and been lied to about plenty, and know what the real reason was.
Yeah.
And I still, while I think that those guys are dicks
And stupid.
and they're stupid, I fully support their right to tell me no because I don't like you. All right,
It's their
fine.
fucking property.
You own
Well,
the property. Like, I think
Yeah.
that you're a douchebag for it, but I completely understand it's your property. You have every right to trust someone in that property for a year plus.
Yeah. Or not
That's
trust
choice.
someone with your property.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so-
your choice. It's that you should only have to rent to the person that you truly want to rent to. Because under this law, if two people show up and they have identical qualifications, but one guy's first, but the second guy is his son-in-law, he still has to say no to his son-in-law by law.
Hold on.
Mhm.
Hold on. Okay. Critics of the law are also concerned that there could be an easy way for landlords to circumvent it. For
See?
example, landlords could just interview people before giving them an application to fill out. If a prospective tenant came to view a unit and the landlord decided that they didn't like them, they would wait and give the application to someone else first.
Yeah.
But tenant advocates in any case say the law is an improvement over the status quo.
But it's not.
It's not.
It's the law. Cobra effect, people.
Hold on, okay.
Unintended consequences here.
It actually goes into that. Ethan Blevins, one of the lawyers who argued the landlord's case in court, said the court rule could actually backfire if you think about whom it is easiest to get housing applications to quickly. Quote, the way the law works, it's going to naturally favor people who have an advantage like cars, internet access, flexible work hours, no language barrier, he said. So I think there's a fundamental disconnect between the people in Seattle wants to help and the people that are going to be helped. In other words, people who take the bus, don't have internet access at home, or working multiple jobs will have a harder time getting their application in fastest.
Yep.
Or, maybe don't live in the area and are looking to move to the area, or they're working longer hours, or they happen to be working normal business hours because
Or even it'll
normal
just
business
become
hours are
that-
called that for a reason.
Yeah. Or even it'll just become that landlords stop advertising and they just tell the person that they want to rent it to that it's available and they don't tell anybody else.
There'll be nothing but word of mouth for any
Yep.
rentals available is what'll happen.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Nepotism is going to run rampant, of course. So,
Well, yeah, and it's just going to be, and that's, again, assuming that it doesn't almost immediately drive all of the landlords out and have them go, no, I'm not going to deal with this. This isn't worth it. Because what's probably going to happen is they're all going to sell those properties and buy properties in the suburbs outside of the city limits.
unless they're big corporations, individual
Right.
landlords, people who get by renting the other house on their property, those kind of people are going to be driven out. Big corporations are going to move in.
Like the article says, the easy way around it is just interview people.
Yeah.
It says that you have to accept the first application, but you don't have to give out the applications.
Right.
Yeah. So what's
That's
going to
what it is.
happen is they're also going to say, and you must pass an interview.
Yep.
Yep.
And that'll
You
be
must-
what happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
First, you have to pass an interview if you want to apply.
Yep. So instead of having the application and then the interview, you're going to have the interview and then the application.
Or or you'll have an application fee that's like so astronomical that only the people who know they qualify completely and everything are going to bother to apply. That's the simplest way for a landlord to do it, is to just make the application fee incredibly
something like
high.
$3,000.
Yeah. And non-refundable.
Even something like a $100 application fee. Like, who has $100 laying around?
Well, and there's, and
not
there are places
not a lot
here-
of renters.
Yeah, and there are places here that do that, especially the big corporate landlords, that have application fees of like $150 that's non-refundable. If you're accepted, then it goes towards your first month's rent. But if you're rejected, it's just not refundable, which means that the only people that ever even bother to apply there are the ones who know that they'll get accepted.
Right.
Yep. Who can afford it? Yeah.
Yeah. So the housing market becomes completely fucking inaccessible to the very people they're trying to help with this law.
Exactly. And that's what's already happened in La Crosse because of that. And it's not because of a law. It's been the result of it's been the result of the local government favoring the big corporate landlords with tax incentives and rent controls and everything so heavily that all of the small guys have basically moved out. So now even trying to find an affordable rental is nigh impossible. And if you don't have stellar credit and rental history and everything else, you forget it. It's not going to happen. I mean, for us to get this place, I had to put 9 months worth of rent down up front.
Jesus.
So
that's insane.
Yeah. So that's the housing market in a city of 58,000 people that has already inadvertently done the same kind of thing that they're talking about doing in Seattle. So imagine how much worse it's going to be on the scale of a city that size.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And Seattle can't afford the traffic jams that pushing all the lower classes of people out of the city is going to cause. Pushing the working class out. Seattle is right on water. I mean, there are bridges and shit. There are bottlenecks for people who live on the islands and have to get to Seattle. Traffic is shit in Seattle.
They're going to wind up with the same kind of housing problem that San Francisco has.
Yeah. Yep.
Where it's going to be just enormous numbers of working homeless people who get up, go to work every day, everything else, but they have no place to go home to.
Right.
Silicon Valley. There's companies in Silicon Valley, which, as Derica knows, is fucking crazy expensive.
Yeah.
Right. But there are companies in Silicon Valley that have back parking lots specifically for employees that sleep in their vehicles.
Oh yeah,
that's insane.
In Vermont, IBM in Vermont, because of the housing situation there for their interns and their lower paid workers, they have corporate housing where when you apply for the job, you are getting a spot at the corporate housing that you only get as long as you're employed there, because otherwise those people could not afford to work for them.
Right.
That's how it was with the migrant farmers here in California too. A lot of farms had their own housing.
Yeah, in the Wisconsin Dells, which is nothing but tourism. I mean, it's a huge tourist area, and I lived there for a while, which is really weird because when you're a local to it's the Las Vegas in the Midwest. So when you're local there, it's really bizarre to be a local. But living there are all of the major water parks. Everybody's kind of heard of Noah's Ark because it's the largest water park in the world, or the Kalahari because it's the largest indoor water park in the world. Those are all there, and they have staff housing apartment buildings because otherwise the people that are coming there just to work for the summers would never be able to come work for them. They would not get a staff if they didn't have that, because they're not going to raise their pay so high that these people can move here because they'd never be able to afford it, and we can't operate without employees, so it's cheaper for them to just build apartments that are just included in your employment than it is for them to worry about
to pay people the salary they would need to live there.
Yeah. And it's just, that's the situation you're going to have to start seeing. You're going to have to start seeing these people who run a restaurant are going to have to buy the building that has the apartments up above the restaurant so that their staff can live in the apartments above the restaurant.
Yep.
It just boggles my mind. The whole 4 people that they can afford to hire because of the $15 minimum wage.
Yeah. And
Thanks,
Kevin
government.
works in DC, and nobody in DC pays enough. None of the regular jobs for people who aren't way high up in the government. Nobody in DC pays enough to live in DC, for their employees. Almost all the employees have to commute, and the traffic is just You wouldn't
yeah.
believe. I mean, it's the worst in the nation, literally. The DC traffic is the worst in the nation.
I've been on the Beltway at rush hour. I know what
Yeah.
that's
It's unfucking believable, isn't it?
It's just
it's mind-boggling.
It's what, 8 lanes? 8 lanes wide of or 6 lanes?
Up to 6 on each side.
Yeah.
In some places.
And it's just all at a standstill occasionally. Like you're just sitting there. You could literally get out and have a short barbecue before you started moving again.
It took Kevin an hour to go like 10 miles the other day on his way home.
I've done that. I've done that here in San Francisco area.
Yeah.
You know, and they've done there's actually a really good Adam Ruins Everything episode about traffic and building roads. And he talks about the fact that when things like that and that lack of access to cheaper housing and things happen, that you can just keep building roads and it makes no difference because the traffic just finds new routes and then more people will now buy cars and move out of the area because now it's simpler to get to and from, and it's cheaper, so they're going to do that. So you keep the same level of congestion no matter what you do, and the only real solution to it is either a hyper organized mass transit, which is only a band-aid, or you have to increase access somehow to affordable housing close to where the jobs are, and that is the only way to alleviate real traffic problems.
Yeah, because like we live an hour and a half from where Kevin works. On days when traffic isn't as bad as it was the other day, it's like an hour and a half. And for what we paid for our house, we could get like a 2-bedroom condo in DC. No yard, nothing. We have 2.25 acres with a 6-bedroom, 4,500 square foot house on it where we live now. We could have got a 2-bedroom condo in DC for that. Maybe, if we were fucking lucky.
You couldn't, California depends on where, but like San Francisco with our bad traffic and all that, you couldn't afford a house for less than $1 million.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and there was that article that came out a few years ago that is probably even worse now and even more dramatic, but it's what can you get for $1 million, or what does $1 million buy, or something like that, where it's on real estate in various places and it says $1 million in this location will buy you that. And like in like Southern California, like in Los Angeles, like the Beverly Hills area, $1 million will buy you this tiny little 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with no yard or anything that's like sandwiched in between other buildings. And then they go to, they don't go to Wisconsin, but I think they compare it with like rural Minnesota, parts of rural Minnesota, where the cost of living is actually higher even than Wisconsin or Iowa. And it's like $1 million will buy you like a mansion and 10 acres.
Yeah.
Like, it's just
and forget about if you go to Kentucky or Tennessee, like, or Arkansas even. Do you know how much fucking land you can get for that there?
$1 million in Arkansas would be insane.
You know what $1 million in the Dakotas would get you?
Yeah. The Dakotas. It would get you the Dakotas.
Yeah, it would just get you
literally the Dakotas.
Like all of South Dakota.
Yeah, it's just like everything that the sun touches or that the light touches is ours.
Yeah, from horizon to horizon.
What is that? That's Mount Rushmore. Don't go there.
Yeah, that's we don't go. What is that? Oh, that's
the Badlands.
We don't go there. You must never go there.
Yeah.
What about that shadowy place? Oh, over there, that's Denver, Colorado. Never go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that cloud? All right.
I gotta go, you guys. I do. Sorry.
Oh.
I know.
Ducking out early.
I have to go to the bathroom so bad, and by the time I get back, you guys will be done anyway.
True.
Sorry. I drank too much water. But I'll see you guys.
She did it on purpose, guys. Don't.
No, I didn't.
All right, D.
No, I didn't. Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Love you.
Yep. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Wait, where's my button? There it is.
Yeah.
Most professional podcast ever.
Most professional ever, yeah. All right. Justices debate allowing state law to be, quote, hidden behind a paywall. Yes, this is the article that you brought up. The courts have long held that laws can't be copyrighted. But if the state mixes the text of the law together with supporting information, things get trickier. In oral arguments, the U.S. Supreme Court wrestled with the copyright status of Georgia's official legal code, which includes annotations written by LexisNexis. The defendant in the case is publicresource.org. It is a nonprofit organization that publishes public domain legal materials. The group obtained Georgia's official version of state law, known as the Official Code of Georgia Anointed, and published its code on its website. The state of Georgia sued, arguing that while the law itself is public domain, the accompanying annotations are copyrighted works that can't be published by anyone except LexisNexis. Georgia won at trial court level, but PRO won at the appeals court level. The case reached the Supreme Court. During the oral argument, some justices seemed skeptical of Georgia's position. Quote, "Why would we allow the official law to be hidden behind a paywall?" asked Justice Neil Gorsuch. Georgia's lawyer countered that the law wasn't hidden behind a paywall, at least not legally binding parts. LexisNexis offered a free version of Georgia's law, sans annotations, on its website. But the version isn't the official code. LexisNexis terms of service explicitly warns users that it might be inaccurate. The company also prohibits users from scrapping the site's content. If you want to own the latest version of the state code, you have to pay LexisNexis hundreds of dollars. And if you want to publish your own copy of Georgia's official code, you're out of luck.
So, ignorance of the law is no excuse. But if you want to even know what the law says, you have to give me money.
You have to give. Is it a private company?
Yes. LexisNexis is kind of like the Federal Reserve. So it's sort of a private organization, but it's so ingrained in legal stuff with government that it's hard to say where private ends and public begins. Because like a lot of companies use LexisNexis for background checks. A lot of them use it for when they do searches for people. Like if somebody skips out on a debt and disappear, they'll use it for searches, because LexisNexis has access to all of the legal everything in the entire US. So like when somebody runs a background check, they're running it through LexisNexis most likely, and it ain't cheap. Let me tell you, it is not freaking cheap. So, I mean, you're talking about probably $500, $600 to use at a low level, that stuff. But that's what LexisNexis is. It's really popular with lawyers. It's really, I've used it a few times in former employment and stuff, because my job's paid for it, for access and stuff. And we use it in my current job periodically too. But it's technically private. So it's annotations. I mean, so literally what's happening in Georgia is the private company's annotations have been codified into the law. And because they hold a copyright to it, the argument is that you're not allowed access to the public law that you're expected to abide by in its entirety unless you pay the private company.
Okay.
If that ain't a clusterfuck and a half, it's
yes.
And that's Georgia. That makes sense. That's Georgia.
Okay, so on the LexisNexis website, let's see, and it is not cheap at all.
No, it's not. If you ever really want to track someone down, though.
The Georgia Government Registry, $1,650.
So if you want to actually know what laws, see the text of the law.
Let a CD of the Georgia primary law, $1,324.
Over $1,000 for you.
Here you go. The Georgia real estate licensing and appraiser laws and regulations. $46.
But still, what this means is you can be arrested for failure to adhere to laws that in order to see, you must pay more than $1,000.
Mm-hmm. The Georgia Advanced Annotation Service, which is published 3 times a year, $160.
And remember, the annotations are part of the official law.
Yeah.
So a private company is modifying the law at will, technically, 3 times a year with no oversight or input from the citizenry. And if you want to see what they are saying, you have to pay them over $1,000.
Yes, to know your state's laws.
Just to know the state's laws that, again, you are expected to adhere by. And if you don't, you will be thrown in a cage by armed men.
Here you go. Wisconsin, Collier Family Law and the Bankruptcy Code. $652.
Do you know how much it costs to file bankruptcy on average?
I have no idea, but I'm sure it's not cheap.
$2,500. That's a single person. If you are a single person filing bankruptcy, it's going to cost you $2,500. So you can technically file yourself, but you have to know the legal code in order to do that.
Which will cost you $652.
Yeah, it'll cost you $652 to know what that is. Now, that's not actually true in Wisconsin. You can actually pull up literally the entirety of Wisconsin state law for free.
Same in California.
Yeah, you can pull all of it up for free.
Mm-hmm.
But in the state of Georgia, that is not the case.
No, but you can have them for $1,600.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. It's Georgia is one of the, I would wager, in terms of blatant extortion, it's probably one of the worst states in the union for it. If not the worst state in the union for blatant extortion. Because they will throw you on probation for anything they can. They'll throw you on probation for driving a car without insurance.
Mm-hmm.
They will give you a year of probation for that, which you have to pay them for. That's Georgia.
Yeah, here's one for you might think that PRO, that is the what's the name of the guys? Publicresource.org. You might think that PRO could just unpublish the unanointed version, or could just publish the unanointed version of Georgia's code. The problem is, as PRO Supreme Court brief pointed out, is that Georgia doesn't publish an unanointed version.
Annotated.
Or the annotated version is the only official version.
Right.
An obvious solution would be for Georgia and LexisNexis to separate the two works. Georgia can publish an official unannotated version of the state code that would be public domain. LexisNexis could independently produce and publish an annotated guide to the state code, keep the copyright, and charge customers for it. Indeed, Westlaw produces its own copyrighted annotation of the Georgia State Code. But the state of Georgia argues that the intermingling of the statute and the annotations is necessary to finance the creation of the annotations in the first place.
Let me
read that. Yeah, let me read that again. But the state of Georgia argues that the intermingling of the statute and the annotations is necessary to finance the creations of the annotations in the first place.
We need the annotations to pay for
the annotations. Yeah. That's like we need to get the flu shot in order to pay for the flu shot.
No. See, I need this truck in order to pay for this truck.
Yeah. LexisNexis covers the cost of producing the annotation code, then it recoups its investment by charging for copies of it. If the Supreme Court holds that the official code of Georgia annotated is the public domain, the business model wouldn't work anymore.
But here's arguably the funniest part about that, right? Consider the annotations themselves are part of the official law. And their argument is that they need those annotations to pay for the annotations. However, why did they need them in the very, very first place? The answer is because even the lawmakers and enforcers don't understand the law without someone else explaining it to them.
Yes, legal speak is worse than a forked tongue.
Even the people whose job it is to decide whether or not to throw you in a cage for not obeying a law that you have to pay to see, but are expected to obey anyway. Even those people don't understand the very laws that they will then throw you in a cage for, unless an independent company tells them what the hell the law is saying.
Yes. And you have to have people tell them what the law is saying in order to pay for them to tell them what the law is saying.
I just the absurdity of all of this boggles the mind.
It is the worst logic circle ever.
And the thing is, you know that they're going to wind up getting the okay to keep doing this. Uh-huh. You know that that's going to happen. Like at the end of the day, they're going to say, no, this is okay.
Or the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court, in my guess, is going to kick the can.
Yeah, and just kick it back down to the lower courts.
Mm-hmm. And the court's going to be like, oh, well, we don't know what the law says either. So,
yeah. And here's the thing: is where's the lower court located? That it's going to go back to the state of Georgia. So, what law are they going to use to judge that? They're going to use the annotated laws.
Oh my goodness.
They're going to have to look at the annotations to decide whether or not it's okay to make people pay for those annotations.
It's literally like a politician pissing into a bottle and then drinking the piss. To piss into the bottle and drinking the piss. and
then arguing, well, I have to pee in the bottle or else I don't have anything to drink, so I can pee in the bottle. I just really the absurdity.
Oh, clown music plays in the background.
I know what the. Oh, it's even worse. I think at this point the absurdity of this particular thing has actually made this relevant.
Oh yeah,
this is this argument in the state of Georgia here. I mean, I just what? And that's breaking it all down to its ultimate logical absurdity. It's reductio absurdum to a certain extent, but it's true that is the reasoning that they're using. And again, I mean, what really pisses me off the most about it, and the whole reason I'd originally share it was like, oh my God, is Georgia, the state of Georgia forces you to pay to see the law that they will also cage you for not obeying.
Yes.
Oh, but freedom. We're so free.
We are so fucking free, but you can't know the law.
But you don't get to know what the law says.
Yeah, you don't get to know what the law says. But ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Yeah, ignorance of the law is no excuse. But you have to pay $1,300 to know what the law is. So essentially what they're saying is, de facto what they're saying here is you have no excuse to not pay $1,300 to LexisNexis if you live in the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
They reserve the right to cage you for not paying a private company $1,300.
Yeah, it's just fucking illogical.
What?
I don't know. All right, I got one more quick one. I just want to bring it up because, well, I can. Developer faces prison time for giving blockchain talk in North Korea. Okay, prominent hacker and Ethereum developer Virgil Griffith was arrested by U.S. government Friday after he spoke at an April conference on blockchain technologies in North Korea. The U.S. government considers his presentation to be a transfer of technology and therefore a violation of U.S. sanctions. But Griffith's defenders, including Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin, describes the arrest as a massive overaction. Griffith worked for the Ethereum Foundation, and Buterin called him a friend. Quote, I don't think what Virgil did gave the DPRK any kind of real help in doing anything bad. He delivered a presentation based on publicly available information and open source software. But federal prosecutors argue that Griffith, a U.S. citizen residing in Singapore, knew full well that his trip violated U.S. sanctioned laws. They said he sought approval for the trip from the U.S. State Department, and his request was denied. Griffith made the trip anyway, traveling through China to evade U.S. travel restrictions. In a charging document, the FBI wrote that Griffith, quote, discussed how blockchain and cryptocurrency technology could be used by the DPRK to launder money and evade sanctions, and how the DPRK could use these technologies to achieve independence from the global banking system. Wow, what a terrible criminal.
Yeah, that's why he got arrested, is because it would give anybody independence, regardless of how evil the DPRK. And we all know that it's a horrible, horrible thing and should be obliterated by its own people. But regardless, that's why they're going after him, is because blockchain is the one thing.
He dared speak out.
Yeah, and blockchain is the one thing that really, really threatens the international banking cartels. Blockchain does. And, and the ridiculous thing is they're saying that it's a transfer of technology, and isn't blockchain open source?
Yes. Everything he said was public information or open source.
But he was transferring the technology that everyone already had access to.
Yeah, he did not pass any software, did not pass any hardware. All he did was say sounds.
Yeah, he made a series of sounds that, and I would wager, I mean, and the thing is it's not like if he had gone to China, if he had gone to China to give this and had done it in China, and delegates from North Korea had been there, he would not have violated anything at all, even by the US's screwed up standards.
No. And it's not like he met with like Kim Jong-un. Right? This was a conference that he was at. Right? There were other people there talking about cryptocurrency and blockchain and that sort of thing.
Yeah, he wasn't even,
and he just gave a speech.
Yeah, it's not like he was clandestinely meeting with the top generals of North Korea and giving them a seminar specifically. He was doing this at this big conference and talking to a bunch of people, and it happened to be in North Korea. And he was only giving information on open source technology, and it's open source, well-known information that you can get from multiple sources kind of at will. But they're going to charge him, and they're really only doing it at the end of the day because what he was giving them was an opportunity to avoid the international banking cartels. There's a reason why DEF CON is the way that it is. Why there's the real DEF CON and then there's the fake DEF CON that other people get to go to.
He later told a friend of his plan to help send 1 unit of cryptocurrency, presumably Ethereum, between South and North Korea. The friend asked, quote, is it that violating sanctions? Griffith replied, it is, according to the U.S. government. Wow, he might help the voluntary transfer of a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and all of that's ignoring the fact that even the DPRK cannot, within its borders, actually control the flow of cryptocurrency because of the way cryptocurrency works. So if it becomes something that's available to the people of North Korea, they can transfer wealth independent of the government. and value and capital, and then this destabilizes the government of North Korea, which is also counter to what the United States government wants. It doesn't actually want to destabilize. It wants North Korea because it needs that enemy, quote unquote. It needs that to exist in some form. They need it to not fall apart.
Mm-hmm. And let's not forget the other aspect here. I mean, this guy could very well get charged with some sort of treasonous activity and get locked away for 20, 30, 40 years.
Oh, yeah. He could actually, because he's being charged with a violation of the Aiding the Enemy Act, he could actually be executed for this.
Oh, lovely. That's fantastic. Yay.
That is actually an available punishment for a sentence for violating the Aiding the Enemy Act.
Because freedom. And yeah, it's to make an example out of him. That's what it is. It's the same that they did with Ross. It's the same that they're trying to do with Cody. It's the same that they did with other people, and it's ridiculous. It's
the same thing that if they could get their hands on McAfee in the right way, they would do to McAfee.
Oh,
I mean,
they would need a tactical nuke to take out McAfee.
Well, yeah, I mean the man is just nuts in so many ways, but and I love McAfee. I do. I think he's freaking awesome. I'm always rooting for him. But I mean, he's crazy as hell. But he's the guy who chased a CIA operative off of his boat with gunfire. I mean, dude, that is awesome.
Yeah. McAfee and Supreme 2020.
Yeah,
Coke and ponies.
Yeah. See, and I mean, and I would happily work on McAfee's private security if he's interested in ever hiring me. I would very happily work for him. But not that he necessarily needs it, because he seems to have it pretty well in hand himself anyway. But but they would do the same thing to him, and for similar reasons to what they're doing to this dude, is because they want to make examples out of people who are sharing destabilizing, paradigm shifting technologies. People who are inventing these and sharing these and making these available, because that's what they all are, right? What Ross Ulbricht did was a destabilizing, paradigm shifting technology. Yes. What Cody Wilson did was a destabilizing, paradigm shifting technology. What the guys who are developing cryptocurrency are doing, and I mean, I don't think there's too many people involved in the hacker world who don't remember the crypto wars, and they're not that old. The crypto wars got nasty, and I don't think that too many people who were involved in that would fail to call it an extremely destabilizing, utter paradigm shifting technology. So these are all major threats to government power. They're major threats to the banking cartels. They're threats to all of the established old guard that there is. And they have to try and stop it somehow, because you can't stop the signal. Once it's out there, it's nigh impossible to shut the lid on that Pandora's box. And
technology has advanced to the point now where you can have lightning and mesh networks that work without the internet. So you could trade Bitcoin without the internet now using radio signals.
Yep.
That technology exists.
And you can encrypt text messages and send encrypt. There's a text messaging device out there. That, for the sake of not having the voice print of me saying the name and having our podcast flagged immediately, I won't bother to mention. But it's out there, and you can find it, where it's this little device that allows you to text, and it is its own transmitter and receiver and a relay. So what happens is, when you send a text message from one device to another, not only is it encrypted, but it uses other devices within range to hop from one to the next to get to the destination device.
Yep.
So you don't need a centralized network. You just need a bunch of people with them in the area, and you can message between each other, even over great distances, as long as they're all within range of each other. So that's a destabilizing technology, and it's had to be very underground for a very long time because we can't let law enforcement get their hands on the technology to try and figure out how to break it. Like, is ultimately what it amounts to. We got to keep it underground for as long as possible, because once they find it and they know what it is and they get their hands on it and they can manipulate it, it will become less secure. But
once they get their hand on it, the next thing's already invented.
Right. As long as we can keep it underground for long enough, that's the goal.
They still haven't broke PGP.
Yeah. And
pretty good protection. It's out there, people.
Yeah. And it's
get on Signal.
And there's a crypto or an expert on security theater, and I can't remember his name. But I've heard him talk both on a TV episode of Adam Ruins Everything, the one on security theater, which is arguably the single best episode he ever did. And so that's definitely one I encourage everybody to check out. But he also, his podcast, Adam Ruins Everything, he has the guy on for a couple of hours talking about it. And while I disagree with a lot of the things that the guy says, one of the things that he says that I do agree with him on is he brings up the fact that encryption and, and cybersecurity and things are never perfect. And the best you can ever hope for is good enough. And so you always just have to operate on the assumption that part of it's compromised.
Yes.
At all times. Part of it is going to be compromised.
I heard a similar thing on Vonu. Vonu podcast. That's Vonu, VONU podcast.com. Shane Radliff, the Crypto Anarchist series. I'm actually recording with Shane tomorrow. The Crypto Anarchist series that Shane's been doing. There has been a lot of people that talk about security culture and cryptography and cryptocurrency and privacy and dude, this series is fucking phenomenal. It blows me out of the way. Like I'm not a technology guy. Like I can start a fire 8 different ways, but like I just got a crypto wallet like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Like I just got my first Bitcoin a couple of weeks ago. I learned how to use a crypto wallet. And I bought something off Amazon using Purse.io. Like that's my advancement. Like I use Telegram and Signal sometimes. Like that's my security culture in that aspect, but blows me away. So. And
it's and that's the thing though, is like there are some of us out there who are really well versed in, who were there for, who are involved in the crypto wars, who remember a lot of that and a lot of the stuff with encryption and the fight with encryption at the beginning and how hard it was to keep government out of it and to keep things secure and make sure that they were truly secure. And it got interesting. People actually literally died. Were assassinated by governments during the crypto wars. Like that actually freaking happened, where hackers got assassinated for writing nigh unbreakable encryption.
Absolutely.
And now you have governments that are demanding that this encryption be just presented, back doors be built in so that any door to encryption can just be presented to them and they don't have to do any work. And you have this guy who's talking about blockchain, which goes hand in hand with encryption, and really presents an amazing opportunity for OPSEC on things. And they're going after him. They're, the fact that they just arrested him is at least good news. They didn't kill him, but that's because he didn't present any real hardcore information.
No, everything he said was public, but because he's a name, because he's behind Ethereum, because he openly defied them by going to North Korea, they got to go after him.
Yep. And I think that's the other reason too. I think part of it is the threat to the banking cartels, and the other part is because he was so open about his defiance, and I don't give a shit what they have to say. And that's really that. Yeah,
that's what it comes down. And that's circling around. Bring it back to Virginia with the Second Amendment sanctuaries and that militia ordinance and Tazwell County or whatever it was. Open defiance of authority. That's what it comes down. That's the point where we're at now. Like guns and Bitcoin and blockchain.
Defiant.
Like,
yeah,
that's how you protect your freedom.
And defiance is something that they can tolerate people speaking out against them. They can deal with that because as long as it's just words, you're not doing anything.
True, right?
But actually doing things that are openly defying them will paint a target on your back. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple, it just will. I mean, I laugh about it all the time where I'm like, I worry way less about OPSEC than most people because I already have the target on my back and I already know that they're watching the majority of the things that I do. I already know that.
Yep.
Because I've already had a target paint on my back. I've had target paint on my back for years. So, and by the way, not suicidal. I know that's becoming a trend. And I want to point out to everyone, I am not suicidal. I will not commit suicide. I realize it won't actually protect me, but at least people won't believe it then at that point.
Ditto.
Yeah, like I just want to point that out. But I've had that target paint on my back for years and I already know that. So I'm not really worried. I've accepted that that's going to happen at some point.
Like, well, when you have the military background you do and done the things that you did, and then on top of that you go and get like an IT degree.
and I get involved with guys who help run the real DEF CON, the no cameras allowed, no outsiders allowed DEF CON, and you get involved in that and you help out with a lot of these things and then you become an open anarchist on top of all that. Yeah, on top of everything else. Like, yeah, no, there's a huge target on my back. And so I'm not real worried about it. But a lot of people, especially if you're just coming into it, you need to be concerned. We need to have people that in this movement that aren't blatant targets.
Going back to a quote from Ben Stone's book. Let me get the direct quote so I don't misquote Ben because that would upset me if I did that.
Somebody
says a right ceases to be a right if it is impossible to enforce. If that sentence offends you, your sense of good, and a right ceases to be a right if it's impossible to enforce. If that sentence offends your sense of good and bad, then good for you. There is hope for you. And that's really what it comes down to. Like if you can say, "Oh, I have the right to do this. I have the right to do that." Blah 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 blah. Well, if you don't have the means, willingness, and ability to defend that right, then it's not a right. You don't. You can't. If you can't enforce your freedom, then you don't have the freedom. Be it guns, be it privacy, be it secure communication, be it whatever. If you don't take the steps to protect yourself from the government infringing on XYZ, you don't have XYZ.
Yeah, and arms are the first freedom. I mean, they are. That's not to be confused with the term guns, but I mean arms. They are the first freedom. They always have been. The ability to enact violence decisively and effectively.
A harmless person, a person that does not have the ability to inflict harm, that is not a peaceful person. That's just a that's just a person that's a harmless person. That's all that is. You're not virtuous by sheer virtue of being harmless. No. That doesn't make you virtuous. That just makes you what you are. Yes. A peaceful person is a very dangerous person that has that under voluntary control.
Exactly. And that's, I mean, like, and I've dealt with a lot of people who are anarchists and people who are libertarians and people who claim to be pro-freedom, who maybe are not nearly as pro-freedom as they say, but I've dealt with a lot of those people. And who don't believe that I should fight so hard in favor of making sure that we have guns and have lots of them and whatever guns we want. And they're like, oh, it's not as that you can't be so one issue, whatever else. But what you need to realize is that arms, the ability to inflict decisive, efficient violence against those who would hinder your other freedoms, the lack of those is the lack of all subsequent freedoms. If you cannot defend your right to do something, you no longer have it.
Yep. I mean,
it's that simple.
The Bundys had arms. The veterans at Athens had arms. The people that got on the train did not have arms. Slaves did not have arms. So,
right, like because a slave in, a slave laborer in Nazi Germany had the right, because rights don't cease to exist just because government doesn't acknowledge them, but they had the right to say anything that they wanted, but they didn't actually have that ability anymore, which means that saying such a thing as they had the right is purely academic. They didn't actually, at the end of the day, because they couldn't make sure that nothing happened to them for saying it. They could do anything they wanted. They had the right to, but that doesn't mean that such a right was a tangible right that actually existed. It was a purely academic pursuit. So if you give up your ability to defend yourself from people who want to take those rights away from you, you have given up all of your rights, all of them, in one fell swoop. I mean, Benjamin Franklin may or may not have said, those who would give up essential liberty for temporary security
deserve neither
and will lose both.
Yes. So I think that is a perfect quote to end the day on.
Yep.
So on that note, this has been episode 78, and we'll catch you next time.
Yep.
Peace.